America's two great pastimes collide on this podcast. It is baseball and making money from the dog days of summer through the October Classic. Greg Bases Peterson's going to be free swinging at the betting board as he tries to hit a grand slam for your bankroll. Now here is GP.
A special hello and welcome to MLB Overtime Betting with myself, Greg Peterson. We've got a tremendous podcast for you as we're going to be having a two-part conversation with Joe Rivera. He does a great job of keeping up with everything that's going on from a baseball standpoint for sporting news, so that is going to be terrific. He does a little bit of video game stuff as well, and when it comes to handicapping baseball in which you just want to stay out there in the bullpen and you want to stay loose, I've just been trying to give you guys as many different perspectives on baseball as possible. I know that many of you guys, you're getting prepped for a season. From everything we've been hearing, there is going to be some sort of baseball. We just don't know what the divisions are going to be looking like. We don't know when, so it is a little bit frustrating, and it certainly is one of the toughest times to be a baseball handicapper and a baseball fan. And as always, if there's something that you'd like me to address / talk about on this podcast, feel free to fire in a question to my timeline on Twitter at @GUnit_81. If you send it via DM, well, those letters DM to me mean does not matter, but if you send it in the timeline, more than happy to give you an answer. But you're certainly needing to just take a look at a variety of logistical things at this point, because typically when you're preparing for a baseball season, you're taking a look at all these analytics, how a guy did last year, everything like that. Right now, it's just really difficult to do futures. I think that the only futures are up at most books right now is odds to win the World Series. I know that there might be a couple stray ones that have odds to win the National League and the American League, but with that said, with all these realignment plans, you're probably going to be getting a refund for it, and I'm going to continue to stress it on the podcast. Just continue to look at all of these various teams as if they are their own island, because we've seen so many different proposals thrown out there. The Arizona plan, in which every single team is playing their games out there in Arizona. Whether or not that would come with realignment, nobody knows at this point. You've got the Grapefruit League and the Cactus League. You've also now got the 3-region plan, in which all these teams will be playing at their home ballpark, but in an effort to cut down on travel, you would have essentially an East, Central, and West division, and you'd have 10 teams in all of those divisions. So I do think that that would be very intriguing as well. And as you see more of these proposals thrown out there, what you really want to be doing and what you want to be taking into account is some of the similarities in all of these various proposals, because like I said, there are so many unknown quantities right now, but you want to try to narrow it down and think, okay, these are the things that we could probably take away, because with every single realignment plan, Grapefruit League and Cactus League, the 3-region plan, everything like that, it would involve a universal designated hitter. So sort of take that into account. If you do wind up getting the National League and the American League, well, that's the way that you traditionally handicap, so that makes things nice and easy, just being able to take a look at it with that regard. And then you want to be taking a look at the electronic strike zone as well. We are going to be getting on Joe Rivera, someone who is actually very close to one of the leagues that wound up experimenting with the electronic strike zone last year, and that's something that you do want to take into account, because I know that many of you guys use umpire stats for your betting. I'm personally someone that I don't put much stock into it whatsoever, but I know that there are quite a few out there that you do, and if you wind up getting the electronic strike zone, well, you know what? Those umpire stats, they all go out the window. You're not going to be able to utilize that in your handicapping, and the way things are going right now, because umpires were forced to take, I think it was like a 25% cut for the entire season, and they were also forced to take a little bit of a cut as to how much money they're going to be getting on the road. So all in all, when you factor in every single factor, it's between 30 and 35% of the money that they're supposed to make this year. They are taking a pay cut, so you've got to think that the MLB is looking at having games with less / no umpires whatsoever, so that is something that you want to take into account as well. And right now, when it comes to baseball handicapping, you just want to sort of take a look at it like it is a puzzle. Try to put as many pieces together. You're not going to be able to finish it up until we are confirmed that, for one, there is going to be a baseball season, and for two, exactly who's going to be playing where, what divisions, everything like that, because there are a lot of unknowns. But try to focus in on some of the things that it seems like are commonalities with a lot of these realignment plans. Now, with this said, obviously, we might not even have the realignment plan that winds up going into place for the 2020 baseball season, if there is a 2020 baseball season. But the best thing you can do, try to look for some commonalities and try to do as much legwork right now as possible, and just stay hopeful, because the news that we're getting with the coronavirus, it's changing day by day, and I'll go a step further and say hour by hour, but the best thing that you can do is remain hopeful. The Players Association, all these owners, everyone wants a season, so I am remaining optimistic that we are going to be getting a season. I know that someone else is remaining optimistic that we're going to get a season is Joe Rivera of Sporting News. He's going to join me for 2 parts next. We're going to be talking a little bit about just the normal game logistics to start out with, and then in the second part, we're going to talk about some of the teams that we expect to have a good 2020 season, who this layoff might be helping a little bit more than others. So we're going to have that chat on the other side.
Greg is phoning a friend and going out to the Azunia hotline.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for MLB Overtime Betting with myself, Greg Peterson. It is great to have on our next guest. This is a man that joined me on the podcast last year, and he does a terrific job of covering a little bit of everything for Sporting News, does a tremendous job of being able to keep up with their MLB beat, and he is also a man that does a podcast himself. It is called Two Nerds and a Third Podcast, which you can follow on Twitter at the number 2 Nerds and a Third, and third is all spelled out as it is. Joe Rivera joining me on the podcast, and you can follow him on Twitter at Joe Rivera SN, and that is all together. And Joe, it is great to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for the kind intro. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you joining me, and I know you're a guy that, like I said, you keep up with a little bit of everything for Sporting News, and right now the biggest question that all of us have is, well, for one, are we going to have a season? That's the very obvious one, but number 2, if we do have a small season, what is it going to look like? Because obviously we've had so many different plans thrown out there. The plan in which everything is put in one bubble in Arizona, the grapefruit and cactus league plan. We're now getting a little bit of a new proposal that was thrown out there a couple days ago, in which all these baseball teams play in their home ballpark, and you break it up into 3 regions in which you've got the East, Central, and West. So you've got a lot of different things thrown out there. Ultimately, out of all the proposals that you've seen, which one do you think has gained the most traction? And obviously, I'm going to throw this out here right now. This is all very much subject to change. The proposal that actually is what we go with is something that may not have even been thrown out there yet. But if there is one that maybe you've heard mentioned a little bit more than others, which is it?
You know, the Arizona plan is the one that gets me the most, Greg. I just think that keeping all of the players in one area, not really having to worry about a lot of travel. You're using 15 of their local ballparks, whether it's minor league parks, Chase Field, or independent league parks. I think that that makes a lot of sense. And you're keeping everybody in one area, which I think is probably the one that makes the most sense for the time being. You know, but again, I don't want to sugarcoat it and pretend that I know more than anybody else knows, because I don't think anybody really knows how this is going to play out, because obviously, Greg, a lot of this depends on what the public does, right? It's not in Major League Baseball's hands. If coronavirus cases keep dropping, then I think you're going to look at something like the 3-hub plan between Florida, Texas, Arizona. I think that one makes a lot of sense too when you look at the potential division realignments. But as it stands right now, I think the Arizona plan is the one that probably makes the most sense, only because it's the most controllable of the 3 plans that have been introduced so far.
I do agree with you, and I do think that what is so interesting about the plan in which keeps everyone in their home ballpark right now is because, as we know, all of these states are starting to reopen at a little bit of a different time frame. The states more towards the southern part of the country, Atlanta, Florida, they are trying to get back to business as quickly as possible. I'm out here in Las Vegas, Nevada, California, Washington. These states, they're going to be some of the last to open up, and I think that could really lead to something that would be an unintended consequence. We've seen it a couple times in minor league baseball, and I know this because I'm a Milwaukee Brewers fan, in which you've got a new minor league affiliate, and with the ballpark not being set to go for the regular season, you wind up having some of these minor league teams playing like 50 some odd straight games on the road. And that would probably be the case for maybe some of these California teams if they would go with the plan that was thrown out there a couple days ago, in which you've got the 3 regions, but everyone plays in their home ballpark. I just think that would be something that a lot of players would object to, and I think it would just make for something very, very odd, especially in a 100-game season like we're hearing a lot of chatter about right now.
Yeah, you know, the logistical aspects of all this are so up in the air, right? I mean, you just want to look at it like, yeah, everybody wants baseball, but you have to look at it from a logic standpoint in that you have to arrange travel. You're going to have to arrange hotel rooms. You're going to have to arrange, like you mentioned, guys staying on the road for an extended period of time. A long West Coast road trip for an East Coast team is 12 games usually. The team might be on the road for, it's 15, 16 days, but asking a team to be on the road for 2 months or asking players to stay away from their hometown for, wherever they're based for an extended period of time is not something I think the players are really going to want, to be honest. We've heard some guys, Mike Trout obviously was vocal about it. You hear Zach Wheeler was vocal about it. Clayton Kershaw, obviously. So there are guys that aren't really crazy about it so far. And asking players, even for guys who are on the road already throughout the season, you look at their schedule, they have the most 9 to 5 job, right, of any of the sports. And they work 260 days out of the year, whatever it is, you include spring training, and they're on the road a lot already. But when you're asking a lot of these guys to stay on the road, stay away from their families, or they're being quarantined for, a month, 2 months, 3 months, the duration of the season, whatever it is, I don't think a lot of guys are going to go for it. So once Major League Baseball gets past the logistical parts of it, the testing and the hotels and the travel and food, how are you going to handle it if a player on a team gets coronavirus? How do you contain that? Do you stop the season? Do you stop the team? There's so much that goes into it. It's just not cut and dry.
I'm right there with you, as we do have Joe Rivera of Sporting News joining me right here on the podcast. And there's no doubt a whole lot of logistical issues when it comes to travel, booking hotels. What happens if a guy does wind up, unfortunately, getting hit with the virus and everything like that. But there's logistical issues just with the game itself, because as we know, typically the National League and the American League, National League does not have the designated hitter. The American League does. And with so many of these proposals, you have National League and American League teams sort of clashing and forming their own divisions. You've got a bunch of realignment. So I do think that we are probably going to wind up seeing a universal designated hitter this season, which I think is so interesting. And then you also have to think about social distancing. And what we're hearing with a lot of these proposals as well is the electronic strike zone. I think that a lot of people, when they hear electronic strike zone, they start jumping up and down and they say, all right, no more Joe West. And as we know, umpires have been mandated to take a little bit of a pay cut this season. So we are going to be seeing a little bit less umpire involvement with that regard in order to maintain social distancing. But I think that these factors are very big, because I think that no matter what way you slice it, you're probably going to wind up getting that universal designated hitter. And I do think that the electronic strike zone is something that a lot of people should be looking into, because this is something that was tried out in the minor leagues the last couple years. And from everyone that I've talked to about this, the electronic strike zone is actually less accurate than these guys that are actually behind the dish game after game.
Greg, there's so much that goes into it. I'm actually near the Atlantic League, which is essentially Major League Baseball's guinea pig for a lot of these rule changes. And they introduced the electronic strike zone last year, and I spoke to some of their players about it. And listen, a lot of these guys weren't major leaguers. They don't have major league experience, but all of them have some level of experience in baseball. And pretty much all of them are baseball lifers in some way, shape, or form. So you look at all these guys, and baseball is very routine, right? It's very routine driven, and guys are so used to playing one way their entire lives. So not having an umpire behind the plate is a culture shock for them. It really is. Now, that said, the electronic strike zone isn't 100% accurate, but the numbers spell out that it's more accurate than what a human would be. And the problem is a lot of these players, they play that give and take game with the pitcher when it comes to a strike zone. You want to give a guy a high strike, then he might be playing into your hands, because maybe you can lay off that high strike if the strike zone comes up a little bit. So I think a lot of players look at it that way, where, taking away that human element, everything is so perfect and you don't have that give and take. But to broaden it a little bit too, you have a season where throw all the rules out the window, right? Nobody knows what this is going to be like. So it's a perfect time for Major League Baseball to start experimenting with things. Whether it is realignment, whether it is the universal DH, whether it is electronic strike zone, maybe they want to implement some extra inning rules, things of that nature. 7-inning doubleheaders if you want to really get crazy, but you don't want to make light of a very bad situation, obviously. But it truly is the perfect opportunity for Major League Baseball to maybe implement some rules that during a regular year, players might not be a fan of. But now you have the opportunity to do that, and I think that that's a good thing.
I do think that we are going to see a whole bunch of different rule changes that you typically wouldn't see in baseball. I know that there's been rumblings about the universal designated hitter, the electronic strike zone, but now it has really sped up the time clock with regards to implementing those sorts of things, as we do have Joe Rivera joining me right here on the podcast. I think we did a solid job there of looking into some of the logistics. So coming up next, it is that time in which we dive a little bit more into the teams that might benefit from this layoff, some of the teams that we think might have a very good 2020 season when we do get baseball back into our lives. And we're going to have that on the other side with Joe Rivera right here on MLB Overtime Betting with myself, Greg Peterson.
Welcome back to MLB Overtime. Greg is throwing a gem, so yeah, he better not blow it.
And we are back here in lovely Las Vegas for MLB Overtime Betting with myself, Greg Peterson. We are still being joined by Joe Rivera, who does a terrific job of being able to keep up with Major League Baseball for Sporting News. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe Rivera SN. And in the first part of the conversation, we talked about some of the logistics when it comes to gameplay. Now let's hit on some of these teams that we think might be able to benefit from a condensed 2020 season. I do think that there are going to be a couple teams that have a little bit of an advantage just based on how they're built. Right now, as I'm taking a look at it, it's really hard for pitchers to be able to stay loose during this time because, let's face it, everything is shut down. If you're a starting pitcher like a Max Scherzer, a Garrett Cole, someone like this, you're able to play catch with your wife/girlfriend and or a child. I don't think that you're going to want to put a 90+ mile per hour fastball on any of these people, especially not like a 5-year-old child that, well, if you're putting a 95-year-old fastball on a child, I think that would not necessarily be the best thing in the world. And I think as a result, we're going to see these teams that have a little bit of a deeper bullpen, like the Tampa Bay Rays, the Milwaukee Brewers. I like the way that the Chicago White Sox had a fairly decent bullpen last year and were able to bolster their rotation a little bit. I think that these are teams that are going to have a little bit more of an advantage come the 2020 season. I don't know how you see this. Obviously, it is strange for all these players, but I think that this hurts the most these starting pitchers that they were all ramped up. They were good to go. Now they've just been sitting around for nearly 2 months. They're going to have a couple weeks with that extended spring training, but having to try to go out there at the beginning of the year and go like 90+ pitches, I think is going to be the biggest challenge of anyone for this season.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think that when you're looking at whatever season that they decide on, players are absolutely going to want some kind of spring training, summer training, I guess it's going to be, because you can't expect a guy to go into the season cold, right? A pitcher is going to want to ramp up and stretch out his arm a little bit before the season. You're going to see that. Guys are absolutely going to want things like that. So a team like the Rays you mentioned, who I absolutely love the Rays before this season. I loved them last year. I just think that from a pure baseball standpoint, they're built to win now and they're built to win in the future. I mean, throughout the years, we've seen the Rays develop so much great pitching, right? Whether it was James Shields, David Price, Chris Archer had a few good years there. Now, obviously, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow. I mean, their farm system is incredibly deep, too. And then, make no mistake, they are better on the field position-wise than a lot of people give them credit for. So, you mentioned the Rays. I really like the Rays a lot, Greg. And I thought that in a normal year where baseball gets underway, opening day when it's supposed to be scheduled in March this year, and if the Yankees had a bad month, if they got off to a slow start, it absolutely wouldn't have surprised me to see the Rays really give them a run for their money in the division. I don't know if they're good enough over 162 games to be there, but I think when you look at a shortened season, anything goes. And I really like the Rays, and I like what they do. And obviously, you don't win 96 games by accident, and it's especially in a tough division like the AL East. So, yeah, I think if you're looking at any of these teams, the Rays are certainly a team to keep an eye on because it's just one of those years where you got to throw all the rules out the door, and the Rays as an organization are so used to doing that already and used to doing unconventional things. So I think that they would be a safe bet for a team to make some noise this year.
Totally agree with you. And you do mention the New York Yankees as well. I do think that they are beneficiaries of this as well because, as we know, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Aaron Hicks, list goes on and on of guys that were dealing with injuries. Now, most of these guys, they're probably going to be pretty close to 100% come the beginning of the year. I know that Aaron Hicks might still be missing some time. You're probably going to need to rest a few of these guys on a every couple day basis, things like that. But this certainly helps out the New York Yankees. And then obviously the Houston Astros, because we know that with the cheating scandal, they were going to get booed to oblivion in every single ballpark they went to. They're probably going to still take a couple beanballs, but it's hard to get booed when there's absolutely no fans out there in the stands as well. So that certainly is going to be helping out the Houston Astros. And even they were dealing with some injuries. Justin Verlander was probably not going to be set for opening day. Now with everything that is going on, he's going to be set to go. And Lance McCullers was probably going to be on a little bit of an innings restriction because he was coming off of missing the entire 2019 season. He should now be a little bit less restrictive with that regard as well. So I take a look at the two powers in the American League, regardless of what happens, whether we have the National League, American League, whether we have the three regions, the Grapefruit League, the Cactus League, or if we have like leaders and legends like they had back in the Big Ten back in the day. I do think that these two teams are certainly going to be a force no matter where they're playing.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, talent counts a lot, right? I mean, you can talk about the Rays, and I think they're a talented team, but the Yankees, the Astros, they're just juggernauts, right? The Astros losing Garrett Cole to the Yankees kind of tips the balance in favor of the Yankees there, right? But, a shortened season, maybe you don't have to worry about losing a Luis Severino for the year as much as they would in an 162-game season, right? And now they're going to have an opportunity to get James Paxton back, who's dealing with that back injury before the season. So, the Yankees, they went out, and give them credit, because in recent years, I understand that a lot of Yankee fans are kind of getting on them for not being George's Yankees or not being that spendthrift team. But I think that they've been financially responsible. I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that, especially when you give Garrett Cole the contract that he got, but they're a team that's certainly built to win now. Their issue last year was the injuries, right? And they were missing that top-line guys, and you saw it in the playoffs. And then once it gets to a Game 6 or a Game 7 in the ALCS, you can't really rely on your bullpen, because at that point, everybody in the opposing lineup has already seen these relievers a few times, and these guys just aren't meant to pitch 3 or 4 games in a 7-game series. So, yeah, I think the Yankees obviously are certainly geared up for that. The Astros, I think a lot goes into the mental aspect of the game. I know we're living in an era where analytics rule and statistics rule and sabermetrics and StatCast, all this stuff. It's obviously very important, and I'm a big proponent of it. But I also think there's a mental aspect that goes into it that people don't realize. And I see it when I cover games. I see it with these guys. They realize, they read headlines. I know a lot of them say they don't, but they do. And they understand the gravity of the situation. So a team like the Astros, yeah, they're still talented, but it wouldn't have surprised me to see them struggle out of the gate a little bit. And I think absolutely that this little respite helps them as we wait to play games this season.
I agree with you, as we do have Joe Rivera joining me right here on MLB Overtime Betting. And Joe, I do think that it is going to be interesting to see what these divisions look like, regardless of which of these realignment plans they wind up going with, or if we get none whatsoever. And I do think that a lot of the teams out there in the Midwest part of the country are going to be very intriguing. I'm looking at the Cleveland Indians. Emmanuel Clase, one of their relievers, he is going to be suspended for pretty much the duration of the season. He's facing an 80-game suspension for PEDs. I don't know how that happens during a pandemic, but with that said, he is going to be suspended. But even the Indians were one of the best bullpens out there in baseball last year. I think that they're going to be dangerous. The Milwaukee Brewers, they've got Josh Hader. They've got a bunch of guys that do a very good job of being able to give the team an inning or two out of the bullpen. They don't necessarily rely on their starting pitching, and they were able to put together a nice run, albeit with a very, very weak schedule down the stretch, but still a very nice stretch without Christian Yelich to be able to make the postseason last year. And then you got teams like the Chicago Cubs, St. Louis Cardinals. Teams are just always there, along with the Cincinnati Reds that really revamped themselves. And if we do wind up getting this sort of 3-region, I guess you could call it realignment plan, I do think that Central would be really dangerous, because you've got a bunch of teams that I think probably win right in the neighborhood of, I would say, 85-ish games. And I think that you'd have maybe even a 3 or 4-way tug of war for who would win that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one team that really intrigued me, and that's the Reds. I look at what the Reds did this offseason, and they weren't really a team that had to worry about really building up their rotation, because if you look at a lot of the advanced stats, they were certainly a top 10 rotation. You can make an argument for top 5 rotation in Major League Baseball. And their issue was they couldn't hit last year. They could not score runs. And some of that is because Joey Votto had a very down year. They didn't really have the depth in the lineup. Eugenio Suarez couldn't do it by himself. So, you go out and you get a Moustakas who's going to, whenever they do play in Great American, he's absolutely going to rate there. Go out and get a Nick Castellanos and totally look at that offense, and it's completely revamped now. So, yeah, I really like the Reds a lot. In a regular year, I actually had the guts. I wanted to have the guts to pick them in the Central, because I just really like what they did. The Cubs didn't really bother to do anything. Pittsburgh's just in a constant state of, will they, won't they. Milwaukee was pretty good last year, but I just didn't see the improvements this offseason that I would have liked to see the team competing. And the same can be said about the Cardinals. There wasn't really a lot of action there. So the Reds really made the effort to be better in the normal NL Central. But when you stack them against a lot of those other teams in the Central, I don't really know how that's going to shake out. But I do look at what they did this offseason, and I just love what they did because they had to get the offense to help that rotation a lot, which was already really good. And we'll see if those moves, the moves that they made, are going to play whenever they start playing games.
It is going to be really fascinating to see these Cincinnati Reds. I know that so many people have joined this podcast the last couple of weeks have been hyping up the Cincinnati Reds, and then you cannot forget that you've got guys like Luis Castillo and company in that starting rotation as well. Sonny Gray looked like the Sonny Gray of old quite a bit last year as well. And Joe, I know that you are still in midseason form. Even though we don't have baseball right now, you do a great job of keeping up with a little bit of everything. You do a little bit of podcasting yourself. Let the good people at home know what you're all working on right now and how they can follow you on social media, because I know that you're putting out a bunch of different things from when the baseball season is going to be getting started all the way to a little bit of video game stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all over the place, man. I'm trying to stay busy because, as we know, it's not just baseball, it's every sport, right? And even in the normal year, I usually head out to Jets training camp and I cover a little bit of Jets, but it's tough right now finding that stuff to write about. I mean, video games, obviously, esports are happening right now. That's like the only thing, a little bit of pro wrestling, but if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can find me at Joe Rivera SN on Twitter and also sportingnews.com. I'm your content guy there. I'm your go-to guy there if you want any of that stuff done. But yeah, I'm waiting patiently for baseball, man, because everybody knows that's my bread and butter. So hopefully we get that sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I'm just proud that you haven't slipped into betting on like Belarus/Nicaraguan soccer. I've watched a little bit of that and it's just not good. So big tip of that there as a big thanks to Joe Rivera of Sporting News for joining me right here on MLB Overtime Betting. If you like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you ever have a question for the podcast, write it into the timeline at GR41. Going to be coming at you guys 3 times a week until baseball is back daily. And then once baseball is back daily, I'm back daily as well. Hope you guys are safe, healthy, and doing well. And I'll talk to you guys in a few days. Thank you so much.